She counted 10 steps to safety, 10 steps to saving the farm, 10 steps to forgetting the man she thought was dead. Beatrice Vane didn't know that Jack Cavendish was standing at the back of the cathedral, watching her walk toward his brother. She only knew that marrying Harry, the Duke of Beaufort, would keep her tenant farmers from starving through winter. The organ music shook the stained glass. The scent of lilies made her nauseated. Her white roses trembled in her hands as she moved down the aisle in measured steps, refusing to look up, refusing to feel. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction, her freedom for their survival. She had made peace with it 3 years ago, when Jack sailed for the Americas and never wrote back. When the silence stretched so long it turned into truth. He had chosen adventure over her. She had chosen duty over heartbreak. She reached the altar. Harry smiled at her with kind, worried eyes. The bishop opened his mouth to begin. Then she heard it, the massive oak doors groaning open behind her. A shaft of dusty light cut through the cathedral gloom. Footsteps, slow, limping, deliberate. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. But she knew those footsteps, the way she knew her own heartbeat. The church fell silent. Even the organ player stopped mid-note. Beatrice's fingers went numb. The bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the stone floor with a wet thud. She turned. Jack stood there, sun-weathered and battle-scarred, staring at her with devastation carved into every line of his face. "You didn't wait," he whispered. But why had he come back now? And why did he look at her like she was the one who had betrayed him? The vestry smelled like old prayer books and fresh scandal. Beatrice stood against the stone wall, her wedding gown suddenly feeling like a costume from someone else's life. Harry paced near the window, running his hands through his hair. Jack leaned against the door, blocking their only exit, arms crossed like a sentry. "Well," Jack's voice cut through the silence. "Congratulations, brother. You've won the prize after all." The word prize dripped with venom. Beatrice's hand moved before her mind caught up. The slap cracked across Jack's cheek, sharp and clean. Her palms stung. She didn't care. 3 years, she hissed. "You vanished for 3 years without a word, and you dare walk in here like I'm the villain?" Jack's head had barely moved from the impact. He touched his reddening cheek and laughed. Bitter, hollow, wrong. "Without a word? That's rich coming from the woman who called me a pauper, unworthy of her affection." Beatrice froze. "What are you talking about?" "The letter, Beatrice." "Your letter? Or have you written so many rejection letters you've lost count?" She opened her mouth to respond, but Harry stepped between them. "Both of you, stop. Whatever happened between you?" "There is no between us," Beatrice said, her voice shaking. "There hasn't been for 3 years. Jack's eyes went cold. "Finally, something we agree on." Outside the vestry, London was feasting on their disaster. Beatrice could hear the murmurs through the thick oak door, shocked gasps, delighted whispers, the rustle of scandal spreading like wildfire through silk and wool. Harry stood at the window, watching carriages depart. "We need to leave, now, before the gossip columns turn this into a circus." "It's already a circus," Jack muttered from the corner. "You're just late to realize it." Harry turned, and for the first time that day, his voice carried authority. "We'll go to Beaufort Hall. All of us. Let the city chew on rumors, while we figure out what actually happened." "I'm not going anywhere with him," Beatrice said. "I'd rather sleep in a ditch," Jack added. Harry's jaw tightened. "Jack, you're my brother. I won't have you sleeping in an inn like a vagrant. You'll stay at the estate." He looked at Beatrice. "And you're still my fiancée until we sort this mess out properly." Before either could protest, the vestry door swung open. Uncle Silas entered, silver-haired and smiling, concern painted across his features like stage makeup. "My dear children," he said, voice dripping with sympathy. "What a dreadful ordeal. Let me help however I can." But his eyes gleamed with something that wasn't concern at all. The breakfast table at Beaufort Hall stretched long enough to seat 20. This morning it seated three people who couldn't bear to look at each other. Beatrice cut her toast into precise squares, focusing on the mechanics of butter and knife. The South fields need rotation this season. If we plant winter wheat... Fascinating, Jack interrupted, voice flat. Tell me, do you bore Harry with agricultural lectures often, or is this performance just for me? She set down her knife carefully. The estate's prosperity is hardly boring. Of course not. It's the entire reason you're here, isn't it? Jack smiled without warmth. Though I suppose some weeds are so good at choking out everything around them, they convince themselves they're flowers. Harry looked up from his eggs, confused. Are we still discussing crop rotation? Jack is discussing his talent for cruelty, Beatrice said. A subject he's apparently mastered during his travels. Jack leaned back in his chair. I learned from the best. After all, you taught me how easily loyalty withers when something better comes along. Beatrice stood so fast, her chair scraped against marble. Her hands shook, her vision blurred. She walked out without excusing herself, leaving her coffee untouched and cooling on the table. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and tried to breathe. Jack hated her. Completely. Utterly. And she had no idea why. The greenhouse was Beatrice's cathedral. Glass panes filtered sunlight into something gentler. The air smelled like soil and growing things instead of lies and bitterness. She was repotting a struggling orchid when she heard footsteps on gravel. Jack stood in the doorway, too large for the delicate space. He looked uncomfortable among the flowers. I didn't come back broke, he said without preamble. In case you were wondering, Beatrice didn't look up from her orchid. I wasn't. I made a fortune in the Americas. Shipping, mostly. Enough to clear Harry's debts 3 times over. He stepped closer. I came back to pay them off. To free you from this arrangement. Her hands stilled in the soil. How noble. Don't. His voice went sharp. Don't pretend you wanted this marriage. She finally looked at him. What I wanted stopped mattering when you left. I didn't leave. Don't. She threw his word back at him. Don't rewrite history because your conscience finally caught up with you. Jack's jaw clenched. I don't need to buy your forgiveness, Beatrice. But you. He gestured at the estate beyond the glass. You sold yourself to Harry readily enough. The orchid pot shattered against the flagstone between them. Get out, Beatrice whispered. Get out of my greenhouse. Harry found Beatrice in the library that evening, her eyes red but her spine straight. He carried a leather-bound ledger under one arm. I need your help, he said quietly. The numbers aren't making sense. She welcomed the distraction. They spread the ledger across the desk, and Beatrice ran her finger down columns of expenditures. Feed costs, staff wages, property maintenance. Everything looked normal until... There. She pointed. This vendor, Whitmore Agricultural Supply, £3,000 in the last year alone. Harry frowned. I've never heard of them. Neither have I. And I know every supplier within 50 miles. She flipped back through earlier pages. The payments appeared monthly, regular as clockwork, always to the same mysterious vendor. The library door opened. Uncle Silas entered, his smile faltering when he saw the ledger. Harry, dear boy, surely you're not troubling your fiancée with estate business. He reached for the ledger. These matters are far too complicated for. I'm quite capable of reading numbers, Beatrice said coldly. Silas's smile hardened. He plucked the ledger from the desk with surprising force. Nevertheless, I'll take this. Can't have you worrying your pretty head over accounting errors. He tucked it under his arm. I'll sort it out with the steward. He left before either could protest. Beatrice and Harry looked at each other. For the first time since Jack's return, they were thinking the same thing. Something was very wrong. Harry insisted on riding the estate borders the next morning. Jack went with him because refusing would have been suspicious, not because he wanted his brother's company. They rode in silence across the south pasture. The fence line ran along a steep embankment overlooking the creek. Harry pulled ahead, inspecting a section that looked weathered. The wood splintered without warning. The fence gave way completely. Harry's horse reared, hooves scrambling at air and crumbling earth. Jack moved on instinct. He grabbed Harry's coat and yanked backward, using his horse's weight as an anchor. They both hit the ground hard, but safely away from the drop. For a moment, they just lay there breathing. "Christ," Harry gasped. "You still have those reflexes. Army training doesn't fade." Jack sat up, checking his brother for injuries. "You all right?" "Thanks to you." Harry looked at him properly for the first time in days. "I've missed this. Missed you." Jack's throat tightened. "I know she doesn't love me," Harry said quietly. "Beatrice. She looks at me with gratitude, maybe affection, but not passion. I'm holding her captive with kindness, and I don't know how to let her go without destroying everything." Jack wanted to tell him, wanted to explain about the letters, the lies, the 3 years of believing Beatrice had chosen wealth over him. But Harry looked so tired. "You're a good man," Jack said instead. "That's the problem, isn't it? Good men finish last." Jack found Beatrice in the library 2 nights later. He'd been carrying the letter in his coat pocket for 3 years, the paper soft from handling, the words burned into his memory. He threw it at her feet. "Read it," he said. "Tell me you didn't write it." Beatrice picked up the yellowed paper, unfolding it carefully. Her face went pale as she read. "Dearest Jack, I must be frank. Your prospects are those of a second son with nothing to offer. I cannot waste my youth on a pauper when security presents itself. Please do not write again. The fantasy is over. Regards, Beatrice." "I never wrote this," she whispered. "Your handwriting." "Wait." She ran from the room. Jack stood there, heart hammering, unsure if she was fleeing or... She returned, clutching a letter of her own, equally yellowed, equally worn. "Read yours," she demanded. He took it. The handwriting was his, or close enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. "Beatrice, I'm not returning. I found freedom here, and a woman who doesn't measure a man's worth by his brother's title. Whatever we had is finished. Forget me." "Jack, I never wrote that," he said. They stared at each other, truth dawning like a slow, terrible sunrise. Beatrice turned both letters over, holding them to the lamplight. "The paper. Look at the watermark." Jack saw it. The Cavendish ducal crest, faint but unmistakable. The expensive bond paper, used only in the estate office. "Silas," they said together. Beatrice sat down before her legs gave out. 3 years. 3 years of believing Jack had abandoned her for adventure and another woman. 3 years of burying grief so deep, she'd convinced herself it was acceptance. All of it built on lies written in forged ink. "He wanted us apart," Jack said, voice hollow. "But why? Control." Beatrice's mind raced through implications. If you stayed away, Harry would remain isolated. Easier to manipulate. Jack moved toward her. She could see the same devastation in his eyes that she felt carving through her chest. He reached for her hand. She pulled back. "Don't," her voice cracked. "I'm still engaged to your brother. Harry is innocent in this. He saved my family when no one else would. Beatrice, we can't tell him. Not yet." She forced herself to think strategically, to push feeling aside like she'd learned to do. "He won't believe us without proof. Silas will claim we forged these letters ourselves to justify an affair." Jack's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Then we find proof." "The ledger," Beatrice said. "The missing funds. Silas took it too quickly, too defensively. If he forged our letters, he's capable of forging financial documents. We expose him together." "Together," she agreed. They stood 2 feet apart, close enough to touch, separated by honor and 3 years of manufactured silence. The truth had freed them from lies but trapped them in something worse. Uncle Silas announced the dinner party with theatrical concern. "We must show London that the Cavendish family remains united, despite this unfortunate confusion." 20 guests filled the dining room. Beatrice wore green silk and a smile that felt like armor. Jack sat across from her, evening coat tailored, expression unreadable. Harry presided at the head of the table, trying his best to look ducal. Silas stood to offer a toast. To my dear nephew the Duke. May he find the strength to navigate these turbulent waters, even when his gentle nature makes him ill-equipped for life's harsher realities. The insult landed softly, wrapped in concern. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Harry's nature, Beatrice said clearly, is exactly what makes him exceptional. Strength without compassion is just cruelty. Well said, Jack added. Though I'm curious, Uncle. You've managed the estate finances for years. How has your strength served the duchy's interests? Silas's smile tightened. I've kept us solvent. Beatrice tilted her head. I noticed the crop yields increased 18% last year, yet the available funds decreased. Perhaps you could explain that mathematics to us. Perhaps, Jack said smoothly. You've been too strong in protecting Harry from financial complexities? They moved through the conversation like dancers, each point building on the last, cornering Silas with politeness and precision. Harry watched them, realization dawning across his face. They were perfectly matched. Intellect, timing, the unspoken language of two people who understood each other completely. He was the third wheel at his own engagement dinner. If you're still listening, I need you to do me a favor. My brother said I won't get up to 200 subscribers on my channel. Please help me prove him wrong by subscribing. Show him that stories like this have real audiences who love them. Thank you so much. Now back to the story. Silas came to breakfast the next morning with constables. His face was a mask of grief. Gentlemen, this pains me more than I can express, but duty demands action. Jack stood slowly. What are you talking about? The missing funds from the estate ledger. £3,000 vanished over the past year. Silas produced documents with shaking hands. I've traced them to an account bearing your signature, Jack. You've been stealing from your own brother. That's absurd, Beatrice said. I wish it were. Silas looked at Harry with wounded eyes. Your Grace, I know he's your brother, but the evidence is irrefutable. Bank records show transfers to an account opened in Jack's name 6 months ago. Jack's face went cold. 6 months ago I was still in Boston, precisely when the thefts began. Silas nodded to the constables. I'm sorry, nephew, but theft is theft, regardless of blood. The lead constable stepped forward. Mr. Cavendish, you'll need to come with us. Harry stood. This is my estate. You'll arrest no one without my explicit permission. Your Grace, Silas said gently. Your compassion is admirable, but misguided. The magistrate has issued a warrant. The law supersedes family loyalty. Beatrice met Jack's eyes across the room. They both knew what this was. Silas had realized they were close to the truth. This was him striking first, removing Jack from the equation before they could expose him. The constables took Jack by the arms. I didn't steal anything, Jack said, looking directly at Harry. I know, Harry said quietly. But the constables let him away regardless. Jack sat in the estate holding room, a generous term for what was essentially a locked study. Through the window, he could see Beatrice crossing the lawn toward the main house, moving with purpose. She was hunting. Beatrice tore through Silas's office while the household slept. She'd picked the lock with a hairpin, a skill learned from a misspent youth climbing into her father's library. The ledger sat in the top drawer, barely hidden. She spread it open under lamplight, examining the entries that named Jack as the thief. The handwriting matched the estate records perfectly. Too perfectly. She pulled a vial from her pocket, iodine solution, usually used to test plant samples for starch. She dabbed it carefully on the ink of the forged entries. The ink bloomed purple-black, then shifted to an unmistakable green sheen. Beatrice's heart raced. That sheen came from one source, iron gall ink made with extract from Juglans regia, Persian walnut. The same ornamental walnut tree that grew exclusively in Silas's private garden. She'd admired it herself during a tour of the grounds. Standard estate ink used oak gall, which produced pure black under iodine testing. Silas had used his own private ink to forge the documents. He'd literally grown his own evidence of guilt. She carefully cut a sample of the ink, collected a leaf from Silas's walnut tree, and ran to wake Harry. Beatrice found Harry in his chambers, already dressed despite the early hour. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I have proof," she said, spreading her evidence across his desk. "The ink Silas used to forge Jack's signature comes from a specific plant, one that only grows in his private garden." She expected doubt, expected him to defend his uncle, to demand more evidence, to tell her she was seeing conspiracies where none existed. Harry picked up the ink sample, examined it quietly, then looked at her. "I believe you." Beatrice blinked. "Just like that. I may be blind to love, Beatrice, but I know my brother is not a thief." Harry's voice carried an authority she'd never heard before. "And I know Silas has been handling estate finances with too much secrecy for too long." He stood, pulling on his ducal coat with deliberate precision. "How soon can you have a full report prepared?" 2 hours. Good. Harry walked to his desk and pulled out the ducal seal. "Because we're going to the magistrate this afternoon, and I'm going to remind everyone in this county exactly who holds power here." For the first time since the wedding that wasn't, Beatrice saw the Duke her farmers had praised, the man who'd saved her family not out of weakness, but out of quiet, unshakable strength. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank me by saving my brother." The magistrate's office reeked of old leather and older money. Silas sat beside the magistrate's desk like they were old friends, because they were. He'd been smiling since they arrived. "This is a formality, Your Grace," the magistrate said to Harry with barely concealed condescension. "The evidence against your brother is quite clear." "Then you won't mind reviewing additional evidence," Harry said. He nodded to Beatrice. She stepped forward, laying out her findings with botanical precision. The ink composition, the unique plant source, the chemical analysis proving the documents were forged. Silas's smile faded. "Furthermore," Harry continued, producing the letters, "these documents prove my uncle has been fabricating correspondence for years. The same ink, the same paper stock from the ducal office. Those could be faked by anyone," Silas said quickly. "Could they?" Harry's voice turned to ice. "Then perhaps you can explain why £3,000 were transferred, not to Jack's account, but to one bearing your signature. I had the bank records pulled this morning." He placed the documents on the magistrate's desk. Silas stood abruptly. "This is absurd. I've served this family for 30 years. "You've been stealing from this family for 30 years, Harry said. "And you used my brother and Miss Vane as pawns to cover your theft." The magistrate cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Lord Silas, these are serious allegations. From a lovesick boy and his scheming. From your Duke," Harry cut him off. "You're stripped of your position, your access to estate funds, and your residence at Beaufort Hall. Leave by sunset, or I'll have you arrested for theft, fraud, and forgery." Silas's face went purple with rage, but he was already defeated. He left without another word. 3 days later, the scandal had shifted. London now whispered about the conniving uncle instead of the disrupted wedding. Jack was free, his name cleared. The estate accounts were being audited and reorganized. They stood in the garden where this had all begun. Harry, Beatrice, and Jack. The afternoon sun made everything look softer than it was. Harry took Beatrice's hand gently. The engagement ring caught the light, a circle of diamonds that had never felt right on her finger. "I think this fits me ill," Harry said quietly. He slid the ring off, slow and deliberate. Beatrice felt the weight of it disappear. "You were the best friend I could have asked for, Beatrice. You saved my farmers, helped me find my spine, and never once pretended to feel something you didn't." He smiled, sad but genuine. "But you were never my wife, Harry." "I know." He took her hand and placed it in Jack's. "And I'm not blind enough to miss what's been in front of me this whole time." Jack's fingers closed around hers automatically, warm and familiar. "Be happy," Harry said. "Both of you. That's all I ever wanted." He walked back toward the house, leaving them alone in the garden, hands clasped. 3 years of silence finally broken. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for Beatrice. Jack led her to the old oak tree at the edge of the property. This was where they'd said goodbye 3 years ago, where he'd promised to write every week, where she'd believed in forever. "I brought you here because I need to say something," Jack said. Beatrice braced herself. "I don't want to go back," he continued. "I don't want to reclaim what we had before Silas poisoned it. That version of us was young and naive, and believed love was enough." Her chest tightened. "I want to start fresh," Jack said, turning to face her fully. "Can we start again, from the moment before the silence?" Beatrice looked at him, this man who'd been a soldier, a merchant, a brother, an enemy, and now stood before her scarred by time and lies, but still impossibly, stubbornly hers. She kissed him, not the careful kiss of 3 years ago, but something fiercer, something that tasted like truth. When she pulled back, she said, "No, we don't start from before. We start from now, from exactly who we are today." Jack smiled, really smiled, for the first time since he'd returned. They walked back toward Beaufort Hall hand in hand, not sneaking through shadows, but moving through full sunlight. At the window, Harry watched them approach. He raised his teacup in a quiet salute, then turned away to let them have their moment. The silence was finally over. Beatrice Vane married Jack Cavendish 6 months later, in the same cathedral where their story had almost ended. This time, no one interrupted. Harry walked Beatrice down the aisle himself and stood as Jack's best man, because some bonds transcend romance. Silas fled to the continent and was never heard from again. Rumor had it he died in a gambling house in Monaco, broke and alone. The estate flourished under Harry's leadership. He never remarried, claiming he was too busy fixing what Silas broke. But everyone suspected he simply preferred his books and his solitude. Jack and Beatrice built a botanical conservatory on the grounds, half research library, half greenhouse. They filled it with rare plants from Jack's travels and Beatrice's experiments. Their children grew up playing among the ferns, learning that love sometimes requires patience, sometimes requires fury, and always requires truth. The letters, both forged and real, were burned in the library fireplace one winter evening. Some silences deserve to stay broken. If you believe love is worth fighting for, hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, would you have chosen duty or love? Thanks for listening to this story. I'll see you in the next one.